it covers many hundreds of acres and is generating large sums of revenue. So he can afford, it makes economic sense to buy equipment that makes it more productive. If it was a very small farm producing very little output, that would make no sense. So you need more scale. One consequence of that is if you have larger farms, for example, you'll have less population in the rural areas and they will move to cities. That's also a good thing. Population density is also beneficial to capital intensity. Just take an example of it seems a trivial example, but take a cappuccino machine in a cafe. They're quite expensive, those machines. I don't know exactly what they cost, but it's something like $2,000 US for a good one. You're not going to have one of those cappuccino machines if you live in a very sparsely populated area, because it doesn't make sense. You're not going to be selling enough cups of coffee. If you've got a dense population in a city, it does make sense to invest in that because you're going to sell a lot of cups of coffee. And the same holds true of all sorts of things. Medical equipment, scanning machines, all that kind of thing. You need a large population within proximity to use it to justify the investment costs. And it's no surprise, if you look around the world, the richest places are all cities. London creates almost all the, well, not all, but the vast majority of the wealth in the UK. And the richest places on Earth, the richest countries on Earth are actually city-states, with the exception of some oil-producing places. Hong Kong, Singapore, for example, are incredibly productive and rich places, and that's because of population density. Now, I should add that I'm not saying that any of these things are required. They're choices. It's just that if you want incomes of the poor to rise, those are the kinds of things that are going to happen. They don't have to happen. People can choose a different path. I think it's quite rational often to trade off wealth for other things that you value. But if you want to see the incomes of the poor rise, then you need them to be working more productively, and that requires more capital. That requires more population density, and it requires certain kinds of legal environments in which investment is a rewarding thing to do. Now, as I say, these are somewhat unfashionable ideas, I know. They're not the kinds of things you hear from charities like Oxfam. They're not the kinds of things you hear about people who are concerned officially about inequality. But I fear that the policies that they tend to promote, though they may bring about some equality, it's going to be people being equally poor. And that shouldn't be the goal. The goal shouldn't be that people are equally poor. The goal should be that nobody is poor. It doesn't matter if other people are richer. What matters is that nobody is poor and that everybody has a good opportunity to work their way out of poverty. And if that's the goal, which I think it should be, then the policy agenda that should be pursued is the one that, insofar I have a limited knowledge of these things, but I think that from what I know, Namibia has been following a basically correct set of policies. The rule of law is good here. Property rights are secure. And I think it would be a terrible shame if the fashionable urge to pursue equality rather than to pursue poverty alleviation were to push Namibia off what has been a very wise basic policy agenda. And so my message is to double down on what you've been doing insofar as you've been doing those right things, and don't listen to those who are concerned more about differences between rich and poor than they're concerned about the poor. Thank you.
Positive? There we go. That's more like it. I think we're getting with the program now. Just a request once again, can we please check the lights, man? I need more light in here so that we can just make sure that everybody's wide awake. Well, the conversation just gets us started. Some interesting talking points already from Dr. Whyte. Just take the notes. You are going to have an opportunity for questioning and answering session as well. Well, our next speaker is arguably one of my favorite politicians in the country, and it's only for one reason. When he comes up and says briefly, then he keeps it brief. You know, usually with most politicians, when they say, well, these short words, he has read 9, 10 pages, and we've been sitting there for 15, 20 minutes. He was former head of Air Namibia in the 90s, the first Namibian governor of the Bank of Namibia, former minister of, or minister in the presidency for economic planning, and currently the Minister of Mines and Energy. It's Honorable Tom Alwendo. Please give him a round of applause. As Honorable Tom Alwendo is coming, allow me to also just observe and recognize the presence of our former Prime Minister, Nazangula. He's also joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for the introduction. Oh, this light is very terrible. I can hardly see who's in the audience. I just want to welcome everybody, and I've heard that Prime Minister Nazangula is in the audience. I can't see him, but welcome, Prime Minister. And good morning to everybody. I'm sorry, I came a bit late because I thought the event was starting on at 8 o'clock. Sorry, at 9 o'clock. So, but I want to thank the organizers of the event for having invited me to speak at this event and share some views on the topic of inequality in society. I think we all know that of late the issue of inequality has become topically, and not only I think local, probably just globally. Everybody talk about inequality, how bad it is. Now, I would like to concentrate my remarks on 3 points pertaining to the issue of inequality. First, I want to reflect on why inequality matters to us and why we should be concerned. Second point is about how corruption impacts inequality. And maybe I want to talk about the third point, just to highlight the role of leadership in curbing corruption and therefore addressing inequality. And yes, Carlos, I'm going to be brief. I think in my view, inequality really matters. It really matters. And I think we should all be concerned about it. Because unrestrained inequality, I believe, is really a poison that has the potential to destroy society. It can paralyze communities. It takes away people's dignity to live, just a decent life. Inequality matters because I think we as human beings are social creatures, and we always want to do better. And we always do better when we are treated as equals. I don't think there's any one of us here who prefer rather to be treated as a lesser being than others. We do better at our careers when we believe that we all have equal opportunities. And the contrary is equally true. We behave obnoxiously when we believe that we are being treated unequally. We adopt an attitude of, I don't care because I got nothing to lose, when we believe that we are regarded as undeserving human beings. We become unimaginative when we live under the weight of greater inequalities. And these are all reasons, I think, why we all should be concerned about inequality in our societies. And we know now there's an empirical evidence that suggests that global inequality is on the rise. And while we may argue that the 21st century is characterized by economic globalization, that we all agree that it has lifted many millions of people out of poverty, we also have witnessed greater social fragmentation and increased inequality. Inequality is therefore a problem that must concern us all. However, we seem to have somehow become immune to inequality around us. We rationalize that it's not our problem. We say to ourselves that we did not cause it and therefore I have no responsibility to take any action. On a daily basis, we witness inequality in its various forms and rather prefer to look away. That is what we have become. The question, therefore, is how much inequality in our society are we prepared to tolerate before we take action? When are we going to cross that line to actively promote a society where people are given equal opportunities? Now, inequality is pervasive and it affects many aspects of our lives. Some of the effects of inequality have become so entrenched in our society, such that we see nothing wrong with it. It just happened. Take, for example, education. It is said that education is the greatest equalizer of conditions of men, and it is true. Therefore, as parents, as good parents will do, we make all the necessary efforts to invest in the education of our children. And those of us with financial means take our children to private schools for better education, so that they can have an edge over the others. Indeed, it's a great thing to invest in the education of our children, and all of us should do that. And therefore, this action on the part of the parents is very admirable and should be encouraged. Because we also know that in this 21st century, nations are all competing globally, and they are competing on the basis of the skills they have got within their society. Those that are more innovative than others will climb the ladder of socio-economic development much faster than those who are less innovative. However, if you look at this scenario with a discerning eye, a scenario where the children from well-off families are likely to receive quality education while those from poor backgrounds receive mediocre education. You may notice that what we are doing as a society is planting a seed of future inequality. And probably inadvertently, we are creating an environment where the well-educated young people will do better in their adult lives,